Care centers for dedication to assisting women, men, and families facing unexpected pregnancy.
Senator from Jefferson.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 7, recognizing pregnancy care centers for dedication to assisting women, men, and families facing unexpected pregnancy.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of my core values is my belief in the sanctity, the miracle of human life, that we are created in God's image. From that belief comes the further belief that each human being is sacred in the eyes of God. It is this belief that inspires me to introduce this resolution on behalf of the West Virginia Pregnancy Care Centers. They provide real health care. In 2019...
Senator, closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
I'm hearing.
Sorry about that. They provide real health care. In 2019 alone, they served 2,500 pregnancy clients free of charge and provided 487 free ultrasounds, more than 19,000 material items, and over 11,000 volunteer hours of assistance, saving their communities an estimated $6 million, all while maintaining a 99% client satisfaction rate. According to their literature, approximately 80% of their clients that were at risk of terminating their pregnancies chose life. I hope that percentage increases over time. This resolution acknowledges and recognizes that the West Virginia Pregnancy Care Centers not only provide health care services, but also provide comprehensive care to women and men facing unplanned pregnancies, including resources to meet their physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs. They take a non-judgmental approach, and their policies are non-discriminatory. I urge adoption of this resolution in gratitude for the great work that they do in our state.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 216, authorizing Department of Commerce to promulgate legislative rules. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 216 contains the rules bundle from the Department of Commerce. In the numbering system that's used, this is bundle number 4, I believe. Yeah, 4. It contains 8 bills, Senate bills numbered 216 through 223 that are rolled into the committee substitute for Senate Bill 216. I'll go through them pretty briefly. The first rule in the bundle comes from the Development Office, and it's a big rule that flows from the passage last year of our Tourism Development District bill. That was a Senate Bill 657, passed last year during the regular session, Mr. President, and we gave responsibilities to the Division of Tourism, and they've come up with this rule to implement the provisions of that bill, which created tourism development districts in West Virginia. The second rule in the bundle comes to us from the, let me back up and say that the Tourism Development Districts rule is codified at 145 CSR 16. The second rule in the bundle was originally Senate Bill 217. It comes from the Division of Labor, and it would be codified at 42 CSR 3, and it's a big, long rule addressing steam boilers and the regulation of steam boilers, and it's an existing rule. It's an amendment to an existing rule, but it's a rule that has not been updated in over 70 years, I think. It's been many generations since that rule was changed, The Rulemaking Review Committee did a bunch of work, Mr. President, on that rule as it came through the process and made amendments to it, lowered some fees. The amendments and the work product of the Rulemaking Review Committee are all incorporated in the committee substitute as the rule lies before us today. The next rule in the bundle was originally Senate Bill 218, and it's a rule that comes from the Office of Minors Health, Safety and Training, and it would be codified at 56 CSR 8, and it really is movement of an existing rule from one place in our Code of State Regulations to another. The offices and the Board of Coal Mine Health and Safety agreed that the language that's contained within these regulations, this rule, would be better suited to be where we're putting it in 56 CSR 8 as opposed to where it is now. Okay, the next rule in the bundle was originally Senate Bill 219. And this is a rule that comes from the DNR, from the Division of Natural Resources, and it relates to the 2-year pilot project for ATVs and ORVs at Cabway Lingo State Forest Trail System. And the change in this rule just provides a sunset to the rule, 3 years from the rule's effective date. The next, and that would be codified at 58 CSR 36. The next rule in the bundle was Senate Bill 220, also comes from the DNR, Division of Natural Resources. It would be codified at 58 CSR 46, and it defines terms that are used in hunting and trapping rules, and it modifies the definition of bait within that rule. The next bill in the bundle, Senate Bill 221, is also a DNR rule, codified at 58 CSR 50, and it also, that one relates to deer hunting. And so that rule establishes requirements that when pursuing and taking deer within the state, and it imposes restrictions on further hunting during the season if a hunter either meets the daily or seasonal bag limit. And language within the rule was revised to allow trapping and the hunting of coyotes concurrent with the first 3 days of deer season, buck firearm season. The next rule in the bundle, Senate Bill 222, also comes from the DNR. It would be codified at 58 CSR 56, and this one relates to migratory game bird hunting. And again, it's just a change in the definition of bait, what constitutes bait. The next rule in the bundle, Senate Bill 223, is finally, it's a DNR rule, codified at 58 CSR 58. This one relates to waterfowl hunting. And the revisions to that rule include the elimination of the definition of permanently disabled in the lower extremities. And that definition is no longer necessary because statutory amendments to West Virginia Code Chapter 20, Article 4, Section 46E that were made during the 2019 regular session regarding Class Q special hunting permits for disabled persons. And it also includes the same change in the definition of the term bait, the word bait, that's in the other 2 rules from the DNR that I mentioned. Mr. President, be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting have voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be made effective from passage, and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The Senior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 absent not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 14, providing for additional options for alternative certification for teachers. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 15, relating generally to infield master's degree. Second reading of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be moved to third with right to amend.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. So ordered. The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading with the right to amend. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered introduced, read by their titles, and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have filed a voting sentiment with the clerk.
The clerk will read the voting sentiment.
Had Senator Jeffries been present in the chamber on Tuesday, February 16th, 2021, he would have voted yea on the passage of the following bills: Senate Bill 9, Senate Bill 10, Senate Bill 34, Senate Bill 78, Senate Bill 81, Senate Bill 126, Senate Bill 140, Senate Bill 156.
Senior Senator from the 8th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that my voting sentiment be recorded in the journal as reported.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. So ordered. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that a leave of absence be granted to the senators from Wetzel and Wood.
Is there objection?
Is there objection? If not, so ordered.
Now, Senior Senator from 17th.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 p.m. in the Judiciary Committee Room in the West Wing.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. and 4:51 We have budget hearings for Higher Education Policy Commission and also the Department of Education. Also, tomorrow morning, your Committee on Finance will meet at 9:30 a.m. and 4:51 and we'll have the tax update bills.
Further announcements. Senator from Preston.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development will meet today at 2 p.m., 208 West.
Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is Ash Wednesday, and out of my office, which is right upstairs, 417M, there will be a Catholic priest distributing ashes from noon to 1, open to all, and the door will be open, but please, if there's a line, stay 6 feet apart. Thank you.
Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee on Health will meet today in 4:51 M, 15 minutes after the adjournment of Judiciary Committee.
Further announcements. Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Economic Development meets today at 1 p.m. 208 West.
Further announcements. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Pensions will meet at 2 p.m. today in the Senate Finance Room. Organizational meeting, and we will also hear from Jeff Fleck of the pensions, Blair Taylor of Municipal, and then also Craig Slaughter of the IMB. Thank you.
Further announcements. If not, the question before the Senate is that the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned.
The House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time, and members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the lady from the 24th, Doggett Mazzocchi.
Father God, we come to you. We love you. We want to work for you. Give us the wisdom so we make the right decisions. We want to be strong, and we want to be a light in this dark world. Thank you so much for letting us be here to stand for the people. We love you and we honor you, and we want to really do a good job. So please strengthen us. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Fellow members and guests, please remain standing. We'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman of the 55th, Doggett Ward. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Tuesday, February 16, 2021.
Gentleman 31st, Doggett Tony.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that have been approved have been read.
Gentleman 31st, ask unanimous consent the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and to be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Introduction of guests, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we welcome Sean Lozier from Charleston as our Doctor of the Day. Please make them feel welcome.
Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Energy has had under consideration House Bill 2081 relating to withholding tax on income of non-residents from natural resources royalty payments. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Chair is in error. There are further introductions. Lady from the 49th. Ordering of the calendar, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An update on the calendar. Special calendar, second reading, House Bill 2536 has been moved to the House calendar. Special calendar, first reading, House Bill 2582 has been moved to the House calendar. And on the House calendar, committee substitute for House Bill 2002 has been moved back to the special calendar, second reading.
Further reports to standing committees.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 2008, amending requirements for licensure relating to elevator mechanics, crane operators, HVAC, electricians, and plumbers. Reports back a committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2253 relating to forgery and other crimes concerning lottery tickets. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2003 relating to the authority and obligations of the governor and legislature when in declared states of preparedness and emergency. Reports back a committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
The report will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that House Bill 2003 be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? There are no objections. Clerk will read the bill a first time.
House Bill 2003 relating to the authority and obligations of the governor and legislature when in declared states of preparedness and emergency.
Bill will be advanced to second reading. Are there further reports of standing committees? If not, reports of select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announces the passage by the Senate of Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 9, Continued Licensed Racetrack Modernization Fund.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 10, Modifying Racetrack Licensing Due Date.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 34, Creating Exemption to State Sales and Use Tax for Rental and Leasing of Equipment.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 78, Relating to Rehabilitative Spousal Support.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 81, Relating generally to West Virginia Uniform Trust Code.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 126, authorizing the Department of Administration to promulgate legislative rules.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 140, Division of Rehabilitation Services Rule relating to Ron Yost Personal Assistance Services Act Board.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 156, authorizing the Department of Homeland Security to promulgate legislative rules.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The Senate has adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution 4, recognizing June 19th as Juneteenth Day.
Message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules. Are there further Senate messages? If not, resolutions, petitions, motions. Lady from the 38th, Dr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that all remarks from all delegates concerning the charter school bill from yesterday be added to the appendix of the journal.
What is that bill number?
I don't remember.
2012. Lady from the 38th moves that all remarks in debate on House Bill 2012 from yesterday be added to the appendix of the journal. Are there objections to the motion? Chair hears no objection to the motion. Lady's motion will be granted. Are there further motions? If not, bills introduced.
House Bill 2564, requiring free feminine hygiene products in grades 6 through 12.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading as bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
Lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2011, eliminating any time requirements for part-time personnel to work during a work year.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, everyone. The purpose of this bill is to make permanent an executive order that came out during the COVID situation. The purpose of the bill is to exempt from the civil service system temporary employees without any cap on hours during the working year. Basically, what the bill does is it takes out that if the person works more than 1,000 hours, they're no longer part-time. It said and works more than 1,000 hours. The executive order removed that, and that's what this bill would do. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and we urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent, not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2011, eliminating any time requirements for part-time personnel to work during a working year.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2019, elevating economic development and tourism departments.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. Gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to reorganize and redesignate the Development Office as the Department of Economic Development and the Tourism Office as the Department of Tourism to highlight the importance of economic and tourism development in the state of West Virginia. The bill also creates a secretary position for each department and is intended to have a $0 fiscal impact. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and we do urge adoption.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 37th, Doug Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman please yield?
Chairman does yield for a question.
Thank you. Thank you. So this has zero economic impact?
That is correct.
Okay. The bill did not. So that's why, I guess that's why the bill didn't go through finance. It only went through the committee that you chair, government organizations.
That's up to the Speaker.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that. Just real quick. So is there no change in the salary? I'm asking because I really don't know. The former director of economic development, do you have any idea what his salary was?
I have no idea, but it doesn't change under this bill.
Even if we're elevating someone to a cabinet level position, they would still keep the same salary?
That's correct.
Okay. And same with
that's controlled in a different area code. Those salaries, those salaries are set in code. What is that in Chapter 2? I thought Chapter 2 had. I could be wrong about that, Delegate, but
so
it's
that would come later on in a bill that would go through finance when we're dealing with our budget.
If it were to change the salary, that is an entirely different chapter of code that this bill didn't deal with.
Okay. Well, do you have any idea what? So you already said you don't know what the Director of Economic Development makes.
I do not.
Okay. You know what a senator makes?
A senator in West Virginia?
Yeah.
I think they make the same amount of money we do, $20,000.
Okay. So I'd say that a cabinet level position does make considerable amount more.
I would say it does.
It's a full-time job, of course, where this is a part-time legislature. I understand that. One more question. Could you briefly explain the concept of like the high three when we're determining retirement for public employees like us?
You want me to explain the concept of how our retirement system works?
Just the concept of the high three, how it's multiplied by your years of service and takes into consideration the top 3 years of your salary.
My understanding of the public employees retirement system is that your final retirement payment is based off of a percentage of years worked. You get a certain percentage for years worked, and that the final pay, that 3 high years you speak of, that final number is based off of the, I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe it's based off of the highest 3 out of the last 5 years, like most pension systems would be.
Okay, so it's based on your last highest 3, and that's what the multiplied off. So hypothetically, if someone was to serve in the legislature for a long time, but then took a position where they had a considerable higher salary, it would be their years of service would be multiplied by that top, and based on the top 3 years that they were earning. Correct?
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much for yielding. Mr. Speaker, if I could briefly speak to the bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising in opposition to the bill, and it's definitely not because I don't see the importance of economic development in this state, and it's definitely because I don't realize the importance of tourism. I agree that those are areas that are of the utmost importance and deserve all the attention that they need to have, and in fact more than what they have had. However, I sincerely wish that we could have divided the bill and could vote on elevating the Director of Tourism and the Director of Economic Development to cabinet level positions separately. And I would hope that if we do vote down this bill, that we're able to take up separate bills to vote on whether or not to raise those to cabinet level positions separately, so each would get a separate up or down vote. And the reason I have to rise in opposition to this bill is because basically something I learned in my upbringing, and that was not to reward what I would consider to be bad behavior. So for those of you who are new to this body and weren't members of this legislature all spring, summer, and fall, when this whole state was dealing with an unprecedented pandemic, a health crisis that stopped our economy, that became an economic crisis, and don't know how frustrating that it was when we have our constituents, some are small business owners that were, if not forced to close, just didn't have the business that they had previously. Service industry people, people who were struggling, needed testing sites in their area, all the different constituents we had that were struggling, coming to us, their representatives in the state legislature, in the legislative branch, an equal branch of government, coming to us and asking for help and having to tell them there's nothing we can do because we can't go into session. And when a bipartisan supermajority of this body signed a petition to bring ourselves back in, basically there's one person that stood in the way of that. And we're rewarding that bad behavior with a cabinet level position and a retirement plan that's going to be based on almost a six-figure salary for the rest of his life. This is in no way personal. I like him. He's my friend. But it isn't. It has to do with we were not allowed to do our job. And at the time, some of us made the insinuation that maybe there was something to gain from him blocking us from doing our job. And he even said on statewide radio, "Oh, no, I'm perfectly fine where I'm at. I'm not getting a job out of this." Well, guess what? Got a job out of it. Now we're going to bump him up to a cabinet level position for keeping us from doing our job. The main part of that job, in my opinion, was the allocation of federal funds, $1.2 billion in federal funds that we could not come in and do our constitutional duty to allocate. Now, some might say that this former Senate president, former lieutenant governor, was the greatest barrier to economic development in this state over the past several months. And now we're going to raise that to a cabinet level position to reward bad behavior. Folks, this is the...
Gentleman with 66.
Mr. Speaker, Rule 32, we went down a rabbit hole here. We are so far out from where this bill is going to do. I mean, we have went to personal attacks, and we are so far out from where this bill is going to do that I would ask the gentleman to refrain his personal remarks, and I would also ask the gentleman to speak to the bill.
Chair does sustain that point of order, but does also note that there are other members who wish to speak to passage of this bill. Chair will ask all members to speak to the actual bill before us, which is the creation or elevation of these two spots, not the people in them. The gentleman is still recognized, though, to continue.
Okay. Thank you. And the point's taken. I mean, I tell you, I'm not joking when I say I personally like the guy. Okay. This is not a personal attack. We're talking about elevating someone to a cabinet level position. This is about his job professionally and blocking the House and the rest of the legislature from doing its constitutional duty of spending money, and is now getting a job out of it. I'll say it briefly. This is the swamp, folks. I remember a very popular and successful presidential campaign in West Virginia that ran on draining the swamp. If you ever told any of your voters or any of your constituents that you were going to come to Charleston and drain the swamp, here's your chance to do it. Vote against this bill. Drain the swamp.
The gentleman of 28th, Douglas Pack, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Chairman does yield.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. It's almost like a scene from Spies Like Us here.
It is.
Is it your understanding that at this moment the governor has the ability to hire whomever he wishes for his staff?
He does.
Does he need legislative approval to hire anybody for his staff?
Even if he did, I don't know that he'd do it.
Fair point. The gentleman in question, to whom we've just heard a most delightful oratory on, is currently a member of the governor's staff. Is that correct?
He absolutely is.
So, and this doesn't increase his pay?
No.
So whether we vote on this bill or not, it still is benefiting his retirement?
He's going to get the high 3 either way.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not that smart. Don't everybody laugh, that ain't funny. Cabinet level positions are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the advice and consent of the Senate. Is that correct?
Oh, you're absolutely right. A cabinet level position, unlike a director or an executive director, those are just appointed by the governor, and the legislature really has no input. But a cabinet secretary must be confirmed by a majority vote in the Senate.
So by doing this, we're actually adding an additional layer of oversight to the legislature. Would you agree with that?
That we would have over that position, absolutely. Or those 2 positions. We are talking about 2 positions.
Correct. So this neither raises the salary of either of the positions, doesn't really give any more authority. It essentially changes their business card?
It will change the business card. It will say secretary rather than director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 36th, Doggett Row, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the gentleman would yield. Thank you very much. As I look at this, I'm glad that your committee took it up, because I think it's the appropriate committee to review state government agency changes. But in looking at the bill, I don't see Small Business Administration. Is it going to stay in the Commerce Department? Do you know?
I believe small business does stay in the Commerce Department. This, if you look at the director's role of what and what I would tell the delegate is the duties of both of these offices do not change. I mean, we're literally only changing the title. So I believe Secretary Gaunch's office would still be overseeing small business development and so forth.
Okay, now, with now having 3, we now will have 3 separate departments for economic development, correct? I mean, affecting economic development.
Yes, I believe you could say that. That would be arguable, yeah.
And did the committee consider any concerns about expansion? To me, when you say bureaucracy, I think of expansion, moving out of the offices here, going downtown, just any concerns about that, or is there any information that perhaps that's intended by the governor?
What I would tell you, based off of the discussions that we had in committee and some of what we said on the floor today, we are literally changing what the person calls themselves. We're not creating new bureaucracy. There's not going to be new staff or new money being poured into this. Is literally a change in title. And the fact that it has to be confirmed by the Senate.
That sort of compels me to follow up with, well, why are we doing it? If it's really not going to have any impact on functionality. But did the committee consider that it was just
absolutely.
Changing titles?
And to the gentleman's point, this is what I would say, is when you look at economic development and tourism right now in the state of West Virginia, I think if we went home right now and we started talking to our friends and neighbors about what are the big opportunities over the next 20, 25 years in West Virginia, it is figuring out how to get companies that are manufacturing and bringing 21st century jobs into West Virginia. It's figuring out how to sell the beauty of our state to the rest of the country and the rest of the world by talking about our tourism. And I think, obviously this is the governor's bill, and I think the governor's message here, which I can get behind, is we're taking it seriously here. We're going to elevate that to a cabinet level position, just like we do the rest of them. And that way, when the Secretary of Tourism is out there talking to folks in Georgia, talking to folks in California, and rebranding this state and selling this state across the country, she walks in with the force of a secretary. And that carries a lot of weight. And is this bill costing a lot of money? No, it's not costing a dime. But I think what it does is it adds capital to that person that's going out and doing that and giving them the impetus that the whole state stands behind this. This isn't just another small agency in West Virginia. This is a cabinet level position, and we're taking it seriously. And that's what we considered.
And I think your argument is something I certainly support in terms of tourism. I don't get the sense that the development office has the same credibility as our tourism office does. And of course, the gentleman recently said that he wished that he could split the bill, and I would support elevating the tourism office as well, but I have trouble with the development office. I'm just wondering, when you said that there's no economic impact, was there a fiscal note on this bill when you consider?
There is no fiscal impact.
Okay. And
I tell you what, I'll even buy his business cards for him just to make you feel better about it.
What's left in the Department of Commerce? You said
well, there's
small
a ton
business.
of stuff in the Department of Commerce. You kidding me? I mean, they handle tax, they handle everything. I mean, there's like 9 different divisions of the Department of Commerce.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there's nothing left. I was asking what it is that is left. I'd like to know the differentiation between the two departments now. A small business is under commerce.
Okay, everything that I see what you're saying now. Everything that the director of economic development handled beforehand, still going to be handled.
Okay.
Just going to be called a secretary. That's it. Everything that was handled by that director beforehand is still going to be the same job duty.
So, like, I don't know if workforce is in there or not, but Vogue Rehab, there were several major agencies.
I thought workforce had something to do with the Department of Personnel.
Oh. I don't think so.
Oh, they're still, okay.
But I think that's workforce training.
Okay.
But that would stay in commerce, or would that go with development?
No, I believe it's stay in commerce.
Okay. Thank you, sir. May I speak to the bill, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against this bill, and I don't really have a great criticism other than I think that we're expanding bureaucracy in West Virginia to a monumental degree. I note that coming across probably from the Senate is going to be the intermediate court. We need to be very careful about this, and I would point out, as the gentleman said, there's no fiscal note. We have no documentation from any member of state government that this will not cost us a dime. There's no documentation of that. There just isn't. And, I'm just concerned that whenever we don't look at the fiscal requirements for bills that we're reviewing, that we're going to end up being very surprised when we get out of the building and we look and see that, in fact, it did cost some real money. I think that there's general support in the body for the Department of Tourism, and I understand that because of the success of the person who is the head of tourism. And I respect that. But we shouldn't create agencies and departments based on the performance of one person. So I think that because of the combination of the two bills, that we should look very closely at this. And because of unintended consequences, we should vote against the bill and perhaps study it and determine it. This has been in the wind for perhaps a month. I mean, this is brand new stuff. We're reorganizing state government, adding 2 cabinet secretaries, 2 new departments. And yesterday, we also voted to create an independent freestanding contractors board with no fiscal note or documentation. We're going fast down this road, and we need to be very careful with what we do, particularly in expanding state government in unnecessary ways, particularly at the top of administration. We need to expand small business administration and the small agencies that are a part of commerce today, and make sure that they're working and functional, helping all businesses, particularly in this COVID crisis. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the members to vote against the bill.
Gentleman the 10th, Chris.
Good morning. 1989, Gaston Caperton came before this body and asked us to redesign how state government is run. The gentleman from the 5th and I were both here at that time, and he asked us for this secretary system to separate government into however many secretaries we wanted at that time. So over the last 30-some years, we've had to tweak that system. I have criticism when we get down into each of the bodies because some of the services have never changed. The top has changed, but some of the services that we see on a day-to-day basis hasn't changed in my lifetime on how they do things. Several years ago, we eliminated the Secretary of Arts and Education because it wasn't working correctly and fitting into the model of how we work government. This is just another one of those tweaks that we need to do to elevate the importance of these two offices, not the people. I have great respect for the Director of Tourism. She has done a wonderful job, but she will never be there all the time, and this elevation is important for tourism. It's also important for economic development. We have an abundance of energy and an abundance of things going on in our state that we need to have somebody concentrating on that job 24/7 and promoting us in such a way that has no other job than promoting the state of West Virginia to bring business here and to help the businesses that are here to elevate their profitability and continue to employ people. Because we got to remember, everybody goes into business to make a profit. And that opportunity allows them to expand their business if they so desire. But we still have some problems when it comes to expanding small businesses because we have a burden on top of us that sometimes interferes with the ability to make money. In my own situation, I'm on a third generation, 80-year-old family business that things that the state does, it would be very easy for us in Parkersburg to move across the river to Belpre or to Marietta and make our base there. But we elect not to do that. So I support this transfer and movement because I think it's going to help West Virginia. And that's the most important part. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman to 67th, Doug Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to vote for this bill, but I do have a concern about it. It's a concern that has been raised by a number of members on this floor. And I want to thank the delegate from Wood, Mr. Chris, for explaining that the fact that Chelsea Ruby has done a magnificent job is not a reason to make this change. The reason to make the change in tourism is that while we've had considerable success in our recent past in West Virginia with tourism, in my view, we would have had more if tourism had been a separate department of government. Now, the chair of GovOrg is correct that this will not cause an expense. He said it's a change in the title. I would suggest it's more than just a change in the title. It also means, in both of these cases, that they will, from that point on, if the bill passes, begin to report directly to the governor rather than through a cabinet secretary under which they currently are. I think it is proper that the Division of Tourism become a separate department and report directly to the governor. I do think that will improve. Over and above what we've had so far, will considerably improve our success in promoting tourism. However, I do not think that the Development Office should become a separate department. The Development, even though there are some other agencies left in the department, they are all very directly related to economic development. And they're smaller than the Development Office. To me, the Development Office is the Department of Commerce. So, and incidentally, I have great respect for the person who is going to be put in charge of that department if this bill passes. Served with him for many years in the legislature. But again, that's irrelevant because we are permanently creating a new Department of State Government. Permanent means until the legislature decides to change it again at some point in the future. And we have no idea when that might be. And so, going forward, there will be other people who occupy this position. So this is why we should not make a decision about whether or not to create a department on who it is that's going to be the initial head of the department. I'm going to vote for the bill. It is my hope that when it gets over to the Senate, that people will begin thinking more about this, and I hope that my idea that the Development Office should stay in Commerce will gain some strength and end up being reflected in the bill that passes the Senate. So you got my vote for now. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Mr. Speaker, permission to speak to the bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise today to strongly support this bill. Yesterday on the floor of this House during a debate, one of my colleagues used the term that it's the government's job to fund their priorities. Fund their priorities. Well, I'm going to tell you, when I look at this bill, tourism and economic development have consistently been some of the biggest emphasis of this legislature over the last 3 years. Here we have an opportunity for no additional funding, I might add, as a body to say these are two of our main priorities, economic development and tourism. I see no harm in this, so all we're simply doing is emphasizing the areas we want as a legislature, our state, to grow. Now, there are those in this body that are upset about some of the personalities involved. As the gentleman from the 10th eloquently stated, personalities and people come and go. Priorities for our state should stay. And I would charge you today that the main reason for this bill is to say, as a legislature, for no additional funding, I might add, we are elevating these two positions to cabinet-level positions because this is a priority of this legislature to improve the lives of West Virginians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman, the 27th, Dr. Gearhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the chairman to go over to you, please?
Chairman does yield.
Thank you. And at the interest of not being redundant, I think we could probably agree that we're not changing the function of these departments. We're just simply elevating. Is that a fair statement?
We are changing the title of the person in charge, yes.
Would you agree that it does create the possibility, maybe even the propensity, for there to be growth within those departments in the future?
I think that would have to be dealt with on separate legislation that would have to come before this body.
Inside of this bill, we're creating, or not creating, we're actually renaming an existing special revenue fund.
Correct.
Can you explain the purpose for that?
Are you talking about the closing fund?
That's not the way that it's labeled. That's the end of the label, but yes.
Okay. The closing fund is a fund that, you know, for probably going to oversimplify this, that could be used as a tool to attract certain businesses into West Virginia by helping, you know, the development office, you know, try to attract business into West Virginia. A lot of states have one. One of the most recent examples that I'd heard of was a factory in Kentucky opening up just right down the street from Williamson, and economic incentives and things like that, tax incentives, were given by the Secretary of Commerce over in Kentucky to attract that business there on just right on the opposite side of the street.
We're not creating this fund, though. We're simply renaming it.
It's already there, yes.
Is it your opinion that that fund, named as it currently is, could not be utilized for those functions? If you read the prior, I would argue that it can, that the renaming is just simply, again, sort of perfunctory, like the elevation of the. Would you agree that the current fund could be used for those closing purposes?
Absolutely.
So the fund is already there. We're renaming it. We've been through a couple of times here that there are no expenditures here, but there is in fact a line item transfer to this fund from general revenue of $5 million. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And are you aware of the current balance of the fund?
The current balance of that fund? Let me see if...
You don't have to look. I can give it to you.
Oh, well, then why are you asking me?
I asked if you were aware. I guess the answer would be no.
No.
Okay. The fund currently has $6.5 million in it.
Okay.
So we are, in fact, creating within this bill the ability or the perception of an additional $5 million potential expenditure for a function that we, I guess, hadn't considered before, even though it, according to what my understanding is, and I think yours, we could have used it before. Is that a fair statement?
I didn't get the last part.
We're adding $5 million to that fund to be spent by this department. Is that accurate?
I believe that's what is appropriated in the budget. And I would say that the closing fund, as I call it, and obviously there's different terminology, that was something that was taken care of long before it was ever contemplated of elevating this to a cabinet level position. That came out of interim studies and other things where, you know, other legislation created that item. It wasn't this legislation that did it.
It is part of the governor's budget. You're absolutely accurate.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, it comes from Commerce's budget. It does not come from here.
Okay.
However, the Economic Development Department currently is under the Commerce Department.
Correct.
So and it becomes utilized by this new department formulation.
Right.
So there is an expenditure to be used by this department from general revenue of $5 million. Is that a fair?
The same as it was before, yes.
Thank you. So, briefly speak to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't necessarily wish to be in opposition to this bill, but over time I have put myself in a position to resist expansion of government. And I believe by elevating these two departments does give us the possibility, the probability that we will have an expansion of government. And we have a line item expenditure specifically for this department in the budget for this department. So that expansion, whether it is part of that budget line item, is in fact an expansion. I come back very briefly to a time in the 70s. The delegate from Wood County referred back to the old days. He probably remembers. When in the federal government, we had a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Education and health were dealt with in the same department. And at that point in time, we separated those two departments and made the current Health and Human Services and the Education Department. That was the 70s. I dare any of you not to find the multiple digit percentage of increases in both of those budgets after they were separated. In other words, that separation did in fact create a massive expansion of government. And in my time campaigning around the state, I have in fact advocated for the elimination of the Department of Education and rolling a couple of those essential services into different federal government departments so that we could in fact reduce back the size of government. I do believe that these two departments are important, but I do think that they legitimately come under the umbrella of the Department of Commerce, and as such, elevating them simply gives us the possibility, the probability of expanding government, and that's something that I sincerely am very much opposed to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the eighth, Delegate Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the passage of this legislation from my perspective as chair of the Energy Committee. For the last 1 to 2 years, I've had conferences with Secretary Gonch within the Department of Commerce and trying to emphasize the importance of stressing specific economic development relative to the expanding gas industry in this state. The efforts to bring in a a cracker plant and the downstream manufacturing that come with it. And I have advocated to the Secretary and the Governor's office at times the creation of a specific person within the Commerce Department to pursue things in the area of downstream manufacturing relative to the gas industry. The executive supports this reorganization in such a way. I believe that the person that is going to be designated to this into this position, both now and in the future, regardless of the personality being appointed, I want that person to emphasize capturing the wealth possible by the creation of the development of natural gas industry in this state, and to advance it downstream manufacturing where the real jobs in this state will be created. The executive is supportive of this position. I will support the executive's position and support this bill for that reason more. Long after the present designee for the new position has left, somebody else will occupy that position, and I continue for that person to advocate on behalf of the development of the resources of this state to create jobs for the create jobs for the citizens of the state. For that reason, I will support this legislation. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 29th, Douglas Steele, to close debate on the bill.
That's why I keep standing up. Sometimes it's hard. I about bit it right there, Mick. We're going to have to work on that. Anyhow, just to close out on this, I want to stress again, there is no economic difference, before this bill and after this bill in terms of what we're spending as a government. He is already the director that we're talking about. He is already the director. He's getting his high 3 either way. The difference now is that the Senate gets to confirm it. There's zero physical impact with this bill. And the fund is being renamed because the office is being renamed. Now I want to take just a brief moment to talk to you about why do I support this bill. Is it because I sit over here on the far right and I have to do things? Sometimes I do, but today I really support the idea of what we're doing right here today, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when I talk to my friends and my colleagues at home, when I talk to my own father, my father said to me at one point, he said, "Brandon, why do we not have a gal that's going out across the country and selling this state as the place to put your job, as the place to put your capital, as the place to put your factory, as the place to put new employment opportunities, as the place to create new growth? Why do we not have a guy that's out there doing that?" And I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. I hear that statement time and time again. All of you hear that statement time and time again from constituents, regular people on the ground, your neighbors, running a grocery store, running a small business. They come up to you and say, why do we not have somebody that's going out there and courting these things in? One of my best friends in the world works as in-house counsel for a very, very large engine manufacturer in Wisconsin. Went to law school together. He's one of my best friends in the world. And when I was first running for office, I called him because I saw a story about that same manufacturer in Wisconsin opening up a major facility around Norcross, Georgia, that was going to employ 1,800 people. And I said, Sam, why ain't you coming to West Virginia? You know what he said to me? He said, not to go through a detailed list, but if you really want to know the facts, Georgia came up to the office and sold us on it. Somebody from Georgia went up to Wisconsin and talked to them and said, hey, we'd like you to expand down here. That's the difference. They had somebody going out and selling it. Now, you might not agree with who's going out and selling it right now. But as the gentleman from the 10th pointed out, this is something that's going to last for a long time. You might not agree with everything that person's done. I don't agree with everything that person's done. I've had a lot of bills passed out of this house in the last 2 years that wound up in a Senate president's trash can. I can tell you that right now. But I'm going to tell you today, I am praying that he is an unmitigated success. I am praying for him every day. If I got to buy his business cards, if I got to buy his damn lunch, I will do it
to make him successful. Because if we make him successful, if we give him the title he needs, if we give him the imprimatur that he needs to go into California, to go into New York, where people are bailing out of those places because they have the wrong policies, and he can attract them here, I will support him in any way I can. I will pray for him every day. I will pray for his success, just like we pray for the success of this state every day. And I will not let my personal judgment cloud that, because there's going to be a day that comes, maybe after 3 years, that somebody else is in that role, and I pray to God that they're successful too. And I pray the words that have been spoken over him today, that God would wash them off and he be not cursed in his job, that he would be successful, because that, by God, is what we need here. We need it more than anything. We need an advocate, and I will tell you this right now, the governor's absolutely right. That man's switch is stuck in on, and there is nobody that's going to go out and sell it any harder than that guy. I wish him the best success. I wish him all the success in the world, and I hope that this is the most successful cabinet position we have in the next 10 years, because we need it more than ever. Every policy you're making right now that improves the economic outlook, that improves the economic climate, that improves the tax structure, that improves the employment opportunities of your constituents is in jeopardy if we don't have capital coming into this state to sell it and to make it run. We got to put gas in the engine, folks. And I'm sorry, but Mitch is running the gas station, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help him out. And that's why I encourage you to vote yes on this bill today.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 86 ayes, 13 nays, and 1 member absent not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2263, update the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers.
No, don't think so.
House Bill 2019, elevating economic development and tourism departments.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate to action to the House, to the Senate, request concurrence therein. Now, next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2263, update the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. Chairman, the 28th delegate Pack.
Thank you, Mr.
Explain the bill.
Pardon me. House Bill 2263 updates the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers. The bill provides clarifying language to PEIA concerning the report it provides to the legislature concerning the claim and payment information from its PBM. Specifically, it requires PEIA to create a clear and concise summary page so that information will be easier to digest. Because of the recent Supreme Court decision, West Virginia is now able to regulate PBMs providing services to ERISA plans. Therefore, a previous exemption for ERISA plans has been removed. The bill sets a floor for reimbursing pharmacies by PBMs at the national average drug acquisition cost and provides for the pharmacy with a $10.49 dispensing fee. It prevents a PBM that is affiliated with a pharmacy from reimbursing that pharmacy more than an unaffiliated pharmacy. It requires the PBM to accept any willing provider and sets forth a process to ensure that it occurs. Similar to a bill which this House adopted last year, it requires 100% of all manufacturer drug rebates to be passed on to the consumer at the point of sale. It provides protections for beneficiaries to choose their particular pharmacy by prohibiting fees, penalties, and monetary advantages for going to a specific pharmacy. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill, and I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? For what purpose does the gentleman in the 59th delegate Reed seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to request a ruling under Rule 49 as to whether I should be excused from voting on this matter, as I am a pharmacist and a pharmacy owner that is subject to the provisions of the Pharmacy Audit Integrity Act.
Yes, sir. As the gentleman has explained the facts to the chair under the conditions as stated by the delegate, the member would be a member of a class of greater than 5 individuals and therefore would be directed to vote. Are there other members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, then the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor, yes, the gentleman in the 19th, Delegate Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate this, and I think this is a very good bill for both consumers and pharmacies, and I do support its passage. I'm sorry, I cannot hear a word.
Rule 49.
That's for
Yeah, Rule 49 also.
Yeah, same set of facts as the gentleman from the 59th?
Yes.
Under
I'm sorry,
the
I have a hearing
same
impairment.
set of facts. It would be the same ruling of the chair that the gentleman would be a member of a class of greater than 5 individuals and therefore would be directed by the chair to vote.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, then the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes and 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting, a majority of members having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2263, update the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, the chair has an announcement from the clerk. The chair is advised by the clerk that we are having some technology issues with respect to the bills that are visible to the members in the online delegate console system. The IT staff is aware of that and is presently formatting an update to the system that will address the line numbering and formatting of the online bills as well as the amendments. If any of the amendments that have been submitted today don't square 100% with line numbering or page numbering, the clerk staff will take that into account when processing the amendments if they are adopted into the bills today. If you wish printed copies of any bills or amendments, please consult the clerk staff at the front table. They will provide printed copies to any member who would prefer to look at printed copies of the bill if your system doesn't load the bills or the amendments that are in the system properly. Bills on second.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2002.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to commit the bill to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that committee substitute for House Bill 2002 be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure. Is there objection? There are no objections. The bill will be committed to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2007, provide for occupational licenses or other authorization to practice by recognition for qualified applicants from other states.
Are there amendments?
Delegate DeSario moves to amend the bill. This is HFA DeSario 2-17, number 1.
Does the member wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's just a double check on this. If we're going to be relaxing ability for people's license, the amendment basically says that when you come in for a license and apply, if you're a resident already, you show your tax form from last year. If you're not a resident, you're not going to have one for last year, but for a renewal, when you come in to renew your license, this is just asking that the tax department verifies that you are a state resident, because it is in the bill. Appreciate it being put in the bill as being a resident of the state, but it would just verify that you are a resident when you're getting these license afforded to you. And I asked for the ability to close and call for the yeas and nays. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the amendment as just explained by the gentleman the second. The gentleman the 15th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, inquiry of the chair of whether or not this amendment is germane.
Let's go up there and vote.
So you're saying requiring of chapter 31, it's required in 30. through business license.
Yeah, like if you're trying to do
Gotcha.
then it's a business licensure, not a personal income tax. Like I don't know what this.
Yeah, you have your FEIN number.
Exactly.
Go through this.
Your business tax number.
This is.
His prayers numerous times and then peppered it with colorful language like that. I know.
He's praying, he's trusting in this. That's right. I thought that was
I know.
You got him thinking. What do you think?
I don't see how it would be germane, but if it is, then we'll.
For a chapter outside the bill, and
Oh.
it's not even relevant. So. Yeah,
What?
but then we would make. No, I can.
Well, sometimes bills have more than one chapter involved.
Yeah, this one has multiple chapters, but this is chapter 11, which isn't even mentioned in the bill. Like, this is chapter on taxation. It's not even in the bill. Well, first off, and I'll explain this in a minute. E-Verify. So, and all this is accomplished in I-9, and realistically, I'm opposed to E-Verify as a whole. It doesn't accomplish that's what I-9 is for. The E-Verify is just another cumbersome process that has to go through the federal government. And this amendment is. And this is.
All right, House will be in order. House will be in order. It's the opinion of the chair that the amendment is germane. Gentleman to second is recognized. Did the gentleman seek recognition? I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
Sorry, I didn't.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman to second. The gentleman to 15th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge a rejection of the amendment because this is going to taxation, and this is already accomplished through Chapter 31B. Your Secretary of State's office registers a business, and they have to have a FEIN number and go through the Secretary of State's office with their business license. So everybody in this chapter would already be doing this, and then this is just putting it somewhere else. So I would urge rejection of this amendment.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment before the chair recognizes the gentleman to second to close debate on the amendment? If not, the gentleman to second, Douglas Nazario, is recognized to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to the last statement, I don't think this is just contractor licenses. I think this is individual license, and it's for individuals receiving these licenses, so it's not a company. And you know, we're streamlining all these processes. So, you know, we want to bring these people into our state. However, residency is unidentified. So I think this is a very simple matter. It's not to get a license. If you want to renew your license because we've asked you to come here, and it's in the bill, we've welcomed you here, show us residency. That's all we ask. So it's not fraud, and we're not losing money for the residents that we are here to represent. So I ask you for your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman did demand a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman to second. Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 30 ayes, 68 nays, 2 members absent, not voting, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Doggett Desario moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Desario 2-17, number 2.
Does the gentleman wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read? Are there objections?
Yes,
there are
Mr.
no
Speaker.
objections.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this does is just put a little bit of teeth into a penalty. So if people aren't telling us the truth about their residency or what they're doing with their licensing, it just gives a way for them to be reprimanded. Thank you. And once again, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Question before the House is the amendment, as just explained by the gentleman. The gentleman, the 29th, Doggett Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd rise in opposition to the amendment. We already have in code various number of crimes that deal with people practicing an occupation without a license. And also the boards already have the capability to put this, and they regularly put this in their rules. As I talked yesterday about House Bill 2006, I think it was, your local sheriff's department and your local prosecutor prosecute people for fraudulent schemes. If someone goes out, holds themselves out to engage in an occupation, be licensed in an occupation, and they're not actually doing that, and they're defrauding the customer, that person is regularly, not just can be, but is regularly charged by local law enforcement with either misdemeanor or felony fraudulent schemes, depending on the amount. There's no need to put this duplicative stuff in code, and we also already have the capability of the boards to reject these licenses, these license applications, if individuals do not have a nexus to West Virginia. They haven't moved here, they're not intending to move here, and the boards will be able to put that into their rules. So for that reason, I would urge a rejection of the amendment.
The gentleman from the second has asked to close debate. Are there other members who wish to speak to the bill, to the amendment, before the gentleman is recognized?
Thank you, Mr.
If not, the gentleman from the second, Doggett Desario, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the gentleman's statement about we already have things in place, but this would make it so that if somebody makes a false statement for an application for licensure, that you would be ineligible to ever get that license again. So, you know, I mean, I'm just trying to keep things on the up and up. We're inviting people in here that could be coming from wherever. So I'd just like to see that they're residents of the state. And once again, I ask for the yeas and nays. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is on the amendment. A roll call vote on the amendment has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Gentleman from the 42nd. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 26 ayes, 72 nays, and 2 members absent, not voting less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Doggett Desario moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Desario 2-17, number 3.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. Gentleman the second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not to delay things here, very simply, this is E-Verify. We are opening this up to people. We've had instances of people coming in from out of state, and you know there's instances of people coming in from out of the country. And I'm here to represent the citizens of West Virginia that want to do the work in this state, that want to have a job for our people. And I don't think it's too much to ask to verify that somebody's a citizen of this nation before they come here and work or have licensure. So I would ask for your support on this, and I would ask for the yeas and nays.
The question is the adoption of the amendment. The gentleman from the 15th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would oppose this amendment as well. The characterization of whether they're not a citizen of this state, we already do that. It's called an I-9 form. every single business goes out and collects an I-9 form and proves that they are in this state. E-Verify is a separate bureaucratic system within the federal government saying, well, now you must also go through this. But the severe issue with this amendment as well is also this makes it the responsibility of the board. So I don't know how many millions we're going to add in a fiscal note if we do this, but basically now, instead of the employer being responsible for your I-9s, the board would also have to collect an I-9 and run it through an E-Verified system, which applies to something like 64, 65 boards. I hope the gentleman consulted all the boards before proposing this amendment and made sure that this was okay, but that's going to really harm not just, it's going to make the boards have to spend a whole lot more money and make it more difficult on this state, but also it's just a costly, unnecessary burden to the boards of this state, and it will prevent businesses from being able to come in, be licensed, and people who come to this state. And as a gentleman to my right mentioned before, people are leaving these larger states and coming here. So we don't want to create an unnecessary burden on this licensure. But again, this is not going to improve anything, but it will make it very difficult for the boards of this state to operate, and I would urge rejection of the amendment.
Gentleman to 30th, Doug Bates is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman, the chair, yield for a question? Would the gentleman, I'm sorry, the gentleman to the right, I'm sorry.
Oh, you just want me to stand up again.
Do 5 more.
Who does the gentleman want to yield?
Yeah. So the gentleman from Putnam, I believe. Yes.
Okay. Gentleman does yield.
Thank you. In your rebuttal to the amendment from the gentleman from the first, you indicated that he should check with the boards before offering his amendment. Did you check with the boards before you run the bill?
Yes,
Did you
we
check
checked
with
with
my
many.
physical therapy board?
We did not check with every single board, but we checked with
so just
a
to be clear,
large portion of the boards. Yes.
A large portion?
Yes.
So, okay. Did you check with the physical therapy board before you ran this bill?
We did email them and make them aware that we were running this board and did not receive contact.
I understand you made them aware that you were running the bill, but did you check with them and run the bill by them before you included them in this bill?
We expected them to contact us back if there was an issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members who wish to be recognized to speak to the amendment? If not, the gentleman to second, Doug DeSario, is recognized to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be up front. I did not check with the boards, but I will also be up front that there were boards in that room that day that were not able to speak. So if I would have checked with them, I would have done the same. If I didn't check with them, it was doing the same thing of bringing them here and not letting them speak. So that's the same thing to me. I don't see where a money factor comes in here because this is an electronic check. So I don't know where all the dollar value comes in, all the extra stuff comes in, but it's an electronic check, and I don't have a problem with checking to see if we've got American citizens working in our state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I encourage support for the amendment.
The gentleman did demand a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the second. Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 32 ayes, 66 nays, and 2 members absent, not voting less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Pushkin and Fleischauer move to amend the bill. This is HFA Pushkin and Fleischauer 2-17.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having read? There are no objections. The lady from the 51st to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to also ask for the yeas and the nays. The effect of this amendment would be to restore the authority of the Massage Therapy Board, which is the same thing that we did for the legal profession, but for a different reason. And I'd like to give you a little bit of background. I introduced legislation establishing the regulation of massage therapy in 1997, and they have had a board since 1998, so 23 years. And when I introduced the bill, there were some jokes and there were some fears about licensing prostitution, but in the 23 years that we've had this board, it has become a well-established profession, and many people benefit from the health effects that massage therapy brings. I asked for permission to have the head of the director of the Massage Therapy Board testify at our committee meeting and was denied. I understand there is some pressure to move bills quickly, but the committee would have benefited from hearing that. And instead, all of you will get to hear what the Massage Therapy Board director said or shared with us. Under the current system, there is reciprocity between the massage therapy boards around the country, and they independently get a primary verification of the training and the experience when someone wants to come in to a state from out of state. According to the director, it's a very effective system. And one of the things that it helps is those of us who have used massage therapy, you can get insurance coverage, and the insurance companies want to make sure that these people actually are trained and certified for billing purposes. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is currently there are several states that do not require a license. Vermont, Kansas, Wyoming, Minnesota. And there has been a tremendous effort to license people or to obtain fraudulent licenses for sexual and labor exploitation, specifically for human trafficking. Our state director was on the National Massage Therapy Board for 5 years, and some of what she learned from her service was that massage therapy schools were opened for the sole purpose of selling transcripts. They were shut down, another one was opened, and it took several years to prove that maybe it was the same owner as the original school that was shut down. They work, the state directors, with state, local, and federal law enforcement to combat this huge problem. They have found educational documents from multiple states were in direct conflict with the dates of attendance. And I'd like to read you a little bit of what she wrote to us, since she wasn't able to testify. Human trafficking is here in West Virginia and continues to be a problem and an issue. My main concern with this bill is once these traffickers become aware of any law changes, they will move the victims to the unlicensed state, submit documentation, whether fraudulent or not, and then move the human trafficking into West Virginia. This will basically open the floodgates of human trafficking into our state. I've seen where these trafficked individuals will get licensed in one state, and once that's accomplished, they will try to get licensed in as many states as possible. The tendency to continually move these folks around the country is amazing. At times, I've witnessed they aren't even aware of what state they are in due to being relocated so often. Massage therapists have worked hard to establish their profession as part of the healthcare industry and to discredit prostitution and sexual activity in the field. I understand the intention of the bill is to permit more licensed professionals to practice in West Virginia. But the negative ramifications and unintended consequences of this bill could potentially turn West Virginia into one of the leading states for human trafficking in the country. I hope you will vote yes on this amendment. And I ask for the yeas and nays, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is the amendment as just explained by the lady from the 51st. The gentleman from the 15th, Doug Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would be opposed to this amendment. I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding here, saying that the Massage Therapy Board is not licensed. It will still be licensed. There's still a massage therapy license. This bill, and not to get too far into explaining the bill, is just another avenue for licensure. If you're licensed in another state, then we will accept you to come here, and you have to get a license, which are still applicable to all the rules of the board. And we passed some language saying that even with misdemeanors and some issues on your record, you could still get a license, such as massage therapy. But if there's a crime with a rational nexus, and it's up to the board to determine what a rational nexus to the crime, if it's a rational nexus to the crime relating to massage therapy. So in massage therapy, if that crime, which as talked about human trafficking, prostitution, along those lines, would definitely be a rational nexus to massage therapy, and the license could be denied specifically based on that claim, because there still is a license in West Virginia, still will be a license. This is just another avenue to that license. But the board, in the situation laid out by the gentlelady from the 51st, would definitely deny that license.
The gentleman to 37th, Dr. Pushkin, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one thing that my friend from Putnam said is correct. One thing, we would still have a licensing board. There still would be a license for massage therapists. However, if this were to pass, they would have to recognize licenses in states that don't have as strict guidelines, or in several of the other states that do not have a license at all, as long as the massage therapist had 2 years of experience. I'll take the word of the folks from the board who said that if we pass this bill as is, it could very well increase human trafficking activity and forced prostitution in this state. I think that the vice chair and everybody would know this more had the bill been properly vetted and had all the witness testimony been accepted, not voted down. People refused to hear witness testimony in this area. My friend from the 54th called for the yeas and nays. I'm glad. I want to register my vote. I know that personally it's contrary to the values that I ran on to promote legislation that could lead to increased human trafficking and forced prostitution in the state of West Virginia. I urge a yes vote on the amendment. Let's clean the bill up.
The lady from the 51st demanded a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment, as explained by the lady from the 51st. Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Lady in the 52nd, how do you wish your vote to be recorded? Lady in the 52nd.
In the negative.
Lady in the 52nd wishes to be recorded as having voted in the negative. Clerk will please record the lady's vote. Clerk will please close the machine.
Oh, no, wait. She was You got it. It's there. It's name. Yeah. I didn't do that. I couldn't find it.
Well, however it got there, the clerk will close the machine anyway. On that question, there were 25 ayes, 73 nays, and 2 members absent, not voting less than the majority having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Doug, it's Foster and Steele move to amend the bill. This is HFA Foster 2-16, number 1.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman the 15th, Doug Foster, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the amendment seeks to do is to exempt the Board of Medicine, the physician's assistants, Board of Osteopathic Medicine, osteopathic physician assistants, and private investigation security services from the bill. I would urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. The gentleman from the 30th, Doug Bates, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from Putnam yield?
Yes.
Could you explain to me why those particular professions were excluded from the bill and not other professions, professional professions?
There were some concerns and questions raised about actual sealed crimes and that the board would not see. So
sealed crimes?
Sealed crimes, yes.
And those concerns weren't raised by other boards?
Particularly by the medical board.
By the
Board of Medicine.
The Board of Medicine. So none of the nursing board, for example, didn't raise that objection?
We have not gotten that objection from them.
So you've not heard from them, or you have not? They said, yeah, we're good to go with this.
We have not heard anything from them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chair yield?
Yes.
Could you please just repeat the occupations that this amendment impacts?
Board of Medicine, Physician's Assistants, Board of Osteopathic Medicine, Osteopathic Physician Assistants, and Private Investigative Security Services.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 2nd, Douglas DeSario, is recognized. Does the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes.
Yes, the gentleman does yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 30-2, is that not lawyers?
That's already in the bill.
Yes, is that being pulled out with everything else? 30-3 is 30-2? I didn't hear you say lawyers when you said the other ones.
Because that was included in the comm sub, they were already exempt from the bill.
Okay, and can you tell me what 30-14 is? 14E?
That's the Osteopathic Physician's Assistants.
Oh, okay, and 14 is the orthopedic physicians and assistants is E?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir.
The gentleman from the 30th, Douglas Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a second time. Would the gentleman yield again, please?
Yes.
Could you clarify for me and for the body what professions are in and what professions are out?
So the ones just mentioned, I can read them a third time if you like.
That would be great, thanks.
Board of Medicine, Physician's Assistants, Board of Osteopathic Medicine, Osteopathic Physician's Assistants, and Private Investigative Security Services are exempted from this bill. Also, on top of that, the legal profession was exempted, so lawyers were exempted, and police officers, law enforcement.
But every other profession is in?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from the 51st, Douglas Fleshauer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you continue to yield?
Reluctantly, yes.
Well, I won't beat you up too badly. I was wondering about the procedure. Now, do you know what the total number of, this is 3 chapters in the code, right? That all of these professions will now have this universal licensing requirements, as opposed to setting their own standards for what out-of-state applicants would have to submit.
It would be Chapter 21, 29, and 30. So 21 is your labor department, 29 is your miscellaneous boards, and 30 is your occupational licensing boards.
Right. So the gentleman from Raleigh asked you to name the professions. Do you know how many of these boards will be under this new procedure?
Somewhere around 60, it's what I can tell you. I'm not sure the exact number.
Okay. And I understand...
I'm being told it's around 65.
65, okay. And we've taken out 5 or so. I understand that these boards were notified by email like a week ago. Is that about right, what happened?
Correct.
Okay. And we do have a situation now where people are not allowed to come into the Capitol without an invitation from a legislator. That's also true.
Correct.
So, and you know that I did invite someone to come, and that person was not allowed to testify. The massage therapy board director.
Okay.
So, don't you think this was kind of a problem for people that maybe didn't realize what a massive change? I mean, they only found out about this bill on Wednesday, the first day of the session. To get themselves here during an ice storm, to come here and provide expert testimony on their particular occupation, don't you think that was kind of a hardship?
And that is why we sent out an email, and we're requesting information from the boards to respond through our council to get information on each of these boards, many of which neglect to respond.
You think a week is enough time to prepare a defense of to deal with how your profession is going to be drastically changed potentially?
And that many people did, so I would assume a week is plenty of time considering many boards did come before us and respond in that manner. So if they could do it, I'm sure others could as well.
And we are in a pandemic, and we were suffering from 3 ice storms.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from the 49th, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield from the 15th?
Yes.
If any of these other boards have concerns with this bill and want to be excluded from it, do we feel that the bill will still be going to the Senate and they would have time to address it before the bill becomes law?
That is how our process works, yes.
Yes, thank you.
The lady from the 4th, Douglas Zukoff's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman continue to yield?
Yes.
Can you tell us how many folks did not respond to your request by email?
I mean, it's somewhere, if you got 65 boards and we got multiple responses from some boards and some did not respond at all, I would assume it was somewhere around at least 60% did not respond. 50-60% is just an estimate. That's all I can give you.
You know that you sent it out to 65 boards, but you can't tell me how many responded back?
We could get you that information, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Well, that would be really relevant to voting on this this bill. Maybe you could get it by tomorrow?
We're not talking about the bill. We're talking about an amendment that specifically removes 5 boards.
Yeah.
So.
I understand that, but I think it does speak to the bill itself. So perhaps for tomorrow, if you could get us that information, that would be very helpful in knowing how to vote.
We will try to have that available.
Thank you very much.
The gentleman at 36, Douglas Rose, recognized.
Yes, a question, if I may. Of the people who responded, were they and opposed it? Did they get removed? Is that how we get to the 4 or 5 boards that we're taking out today?
No, it was due to specifically issues that were raised within, such as like crimes that would not be seen by the board, for example.
Well, I'm curious about the ones who were selected out and left in. You know, we've got the Board of Medicine and osteopaths, I think, but not dentistry. I think dentistry's still in, right?
Physician's assistants programs were sealed for these boards, but not for dentistry, was the reason.
Okay. And the same thing on optometry?
Yes, it would be the same way.
Okay, now explain it to me again, what's sealed?
The physician treatment programs.
Okay. But there's, I see veterinary medicine, same thing on that one?
Yes, same thing.
So whether it was medical or not didn't matter, it was whether or not...
They could gain access to, I guess it would be, basically they couldn't gain access to if there was an issue with drug abuse problems within these fields, as someone that was maybe in another state that had a drug abuse problem, and then they couldn't gain access to that to see that issue was there, therefore they wouldn't know if it existed or not.
Now, as we go through the legislative process, if we discover that there are other boards that don't have access, like dentistry perhaps, I don't know if they have it or not, or optometry, then we'd be able to add them in perhaps as a part of the process as we go through it?
I believe that was pretty adequately explained by the gentlelady from the 49th.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chair continue to yield?
Yes.
Thank you. My colleague from the 51st raised the issue that somebody from the Board of Massage Therapists a request was made for a representative from that board to testify before the committee, and that request was not allowed. Do you recall that happening?
Yes, I remember there was a motion in committee to put that down, but that would all be in our minutes rather than needing to be discussed now. We're talking about an amendment that had nothing to do with that motion.
Okay, do you recall that I also asked leave of the committee for the the director of the Board of Professional Engineers?
Yes, but again, that has nothing to do with this amendment.
Well, it does in the sense of my next question, which is there was testimony provided by a professional engineer, not the director of the board, as to their opposition to this bill. And my question is, now that you're offering an amendment to remove certain occupations from the bill, why did you not remove professional engineers?
Because that was not one of them that had the same issue with the sealed issues of the drug abuse issues that was within the medical board as a reason for not licensing.
Okay, but do you recall the testimony regarding public health and safety that was put forward by the professional engineer that did testify?
Yes, there was a lot of testimony to that accord.
Okay. So you didn't find that compelling to protect public health and safety of people to remove them from this bill?
And we're talking about compelling and public health and safety. That's what these boards are created for. But also every single board in every single other state, which also has a licensure for engineering and architects, there's not a single state that does not license architects and engineers. Not a single one. So they would be applicable to their licensure. I mean, if you can point me to a state where their buildings are falling down relentlessly, then I could exempt that state from this. But I have not, even in the testimony in committee, that was not an issue that was raised.
But do you recall the testimony that the licensure requirements are different in different states and they are stronger in West Virginia than some other
Every
states?
single license has different licenses around the state. I mean, every single state has different licensure procedures for every single licensure. That is no reason to exclude them from this bill. It is allowing people to get into this licensure and come to this state and work. I mean, that's what this bill is for. I mean, rather than the minute differences of every single state, if we made it so that every single state had to be the same, I guess on a federal level, then they would all be the same.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the amendment? If not, the question before the House is the amendment by the gentleman of the 15th, Douglas Foster. Those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2013 relating to the Hope Scholarship Program.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Buckhammer moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Burkhammer 2-17, number 1.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. Does the gentleman wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just simply adding a date of July 1st, 2026, that all kids that are eligible in this state, school-age kids, would now be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. Very simple amendment, just adding a date. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the amendment is just explained by the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Burkhammer. Are there members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman from the 64th, Douglas Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. This amendment provides the much-needed equity in this program by allowing all homeschool and private school children the benefit from the taxes that their parents pay. So for those reasons, I urge adoption.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Douglas Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor of the amendment yield for a question?
Does the gentleman yield for a question? Sponsor does yield for a question.
Thank you. Thank you for yielding. Can you help me understand exactly what this amendment does? You said it's just very simple. It changes, it's added the date, but I'm confused on what this actually does, this amendment.
It just changes the eligibility requirements to where now, as of July 1st, 2026, every school-age child will be eligible for that Hope Scholarship.
So does this start including the homeschool in addition to?
As of July 1st, 2026, it would include homeschoolers and private schoolers.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. All right, thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman from the 36th, Dnr Rule, is recognized.
I just want to confirm, if you would explain, sir, yes, sir, if you would yield. As I understand it, the bill as introduced did not include any student that was not enrolled in public school. In other words, you had to be enrolled in public school in order to have choice to get to the Hope Scholarship, correct?
That is correct, other than if you were eligible to begin school, you became eligible for the Hope Scholarship as well.
Right, in other words, kindergarten, if they're too young to be in school, then if they were eligible, then, okay. But, and I think that the numbers are considerable. I've tried to get numbers from the Kanawha County Board of Education. I just don't have them yet, and we don't have fiscal note on this bill, I don't think. Is that right? You haven't seen a fiscal note, have you?
There is no fiscal note, but I would yield to the finance chairman to answer that question if you had any further questions on finance.
Okay, well, this greatly expands the cost of the program. As I understand it, in Kanawha County, 16% of our students are in private schools. So if each of those students obtain the $4,600 or whatever they calculate, then it will have an absolute, I think, disastrous effect in Kanawha County on the school system, because with your amendment, all of the students would be eligible, all of the students would be paid, and every dime taken for them will come out of the public budget allowed for Kanawha County's school. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, let me try again, I'm sorry. All of the funds that are being paid to the families or for their choice, and it's calculated to be, according to the testimony we had in finance, to be about $4,600 a year per student. If, and I can't verify this, if Kanawha County has 16% of its students in private schools, we have a lot of good private schools in Kanawha County, by the way. If that's the case, that's going to be a huge number of students that are going to be paid, and that means that Kanawha County public schools will not get those funds. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And at one time, about 2 years ago, I was told by the Kanawha County superintendent that there were about 900 homeschool students in Kanawha County. So if that were the case, then that would be 900 that would come out of Kanawha County's budget as well, right?
They are not currently getting that money right now if they are already homeschooling.
Right. But the funds will come to Kanawha County and then go to them, or will it just be set up as an account in the treasurer's office?
I think we're speaking to the bill and not the amendment.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, the amendment dramatically changes, as I understand it, dramatically changes the cost of this. We were told $23 million would be covered, assuming 2% of the students statewide would qualify because they had to be in public school at the time that they applied. I think your amendment would change that to say that all of them who have chosen not to go to public school are eligible for the $4,600.
On the date that is set forth in the amendment. But also keep in mind, everyone is going to eventually be eligible once they get to the state of being in kindergarten. Eventually will be eligible. we're just in a sense closing that gap, and we're putting this July 1st, 2026 on it.
Right. And I'll ask, and I don't know that you have it, do you have any documentation or numbers to give us an idea of what this expansion in eligibility will mean financially to the state?
I do not. I would yield to the Chairman of Finance to answer that if you would like.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman, the 34th, Douglas Boggs, is recognized.
Gentleman yield.
Does the gentleman yield for additional question?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman does yield.
Just one more question, and it's probably just asked a different way. Effective the date of this amendment, which would be July 1, 2026, am I to understand that these students would never have to enroll in public school to be eligible?
I believe you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman, the 16th, Douglas Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman please yield? Yes, sir. Thank you. So as I read it, this amendment is just seeking to make sure that currently, as we've written the bill, the homeschool children are not eligible, but this seeks to change that, correct?
That is correct, but not just homeschoolers, private schoolers as well.
Yes, sir. And I guess, is there a reason that this is 2026? Because that's 5 years.
That's just how I wrote the amendment.
No, oh, thank you.
The gentleman, the 43rd, Douglas Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to urge rejection of this amendment. Looking at this, just the cost of figures alone, this is going to blow massive holes in county school system budgets. Considering the additional with homeschool and private students, I just have a major concern about what that could do to our funding for our public schools, and I would urge rejection of this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 66th, Douglas Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Finance yield, please? So there seems to be quite a bit of discussion about what the potential impact is of this proposed amendment. Have you had a chance to review the proposed amendment?
I have, and met with several stakeholders yesterday. Keep in mind, what we're talking about currently is what we estimate to be about 22,000 students. And a lot of this is subject to headcount enrollment from the previous year. The gentleman's amendment probably wouldn't have any impact until the fiscal year 27 budget.
So no impact in this current fiscal year?
No impact in this current fiscal year budget that we're working on, House Bill 2022.
Okay. So how is it knowable what the impact is in the year of this amendment? I mean, how would you know how many students would participate? How would you know how many students may have opted to go back to the school system, which would arguably have an even greater fiscal impact? How do you calculate that?
You really couldn't. I mean, you could estimate that there's 10,000 homeschool students. Of that 10,000, how many would return? You just don't know. But currently, if there are 10,000 homeschool students, they could all enroll into public school systems today. Obviously, that would be an impact to the budget.
Arguably even more significant than any impact from this amendment.
Exactly, yes.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, appreciate that.
The gentleman, the 36th, Douglas Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you. If the Chair of Finance would yield, please. Just to confirm, we took testimony from the Department of Education, and we don't have a fiscal note, but I've got notes of what she testified to, and the estimate was about 2%, based on the bill as written. The estimate was about 2% of students. They calculated 5,000 students, and it would cost about $23 million. Initially, and then she said over time it would work out. But I think the magic number was 23 million for 5,000 students.
The gentleman is correct.
All right. Now, if we do some math and we change that to 22,000 students, it ends up being about $101 million.
The uncertainty is, of those 22,000 students, how many would enroll? We just don't know.
Yeah, but if you're out of the public school system and you're offered by the state of West Virginia $4,600 just because you are out of the
keep in
school
mind,
system,
to the gentleman, that $4,600, that's going to fluctuate year to year based on the headcount enrollment from the previous fiscal year.
but it's not going to change that much. I mean,
It
we're
could.
talking
It
4,000
could.
some dollars, aren't we?
It could.
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But if it's $100 million, isn't that about 10% of the state education budget? In the school
Keep
aid
in
formula?
mind, I believe the total budget is like $1.7 billion.
Yeah.
So
we can personalize it to our own counties. If we have a 10% reduction in the county, that's going to be a dramatic change in how the counties can proceed, won't it be, with a 10% loss of income?
by the same token, there could be a dramatic change if every one of these 22,000, what we're estimating, were to enroll tomorrow.
Well, their fixed costs, the problem is, of course, is that the county's fixed costs are just there, from school buses to buildings and heating and cooling and you know, all of the costs that they have to endure, and they're not really based on the number of pupils they have. They're fixed costs that they have to pay one way or the other.
Once again, there could be a dramatic change with House Bill 2022 this fiscal year that we're working on, this budget bill, if all 22,000 students decided to enroll. Would they decide to enroll? Highly unlikely. There is some uncertainty. I don't know what that actual cost is, but we would just be making assumptions.
But it would be correct to say that if we're looking at possibly 22,000 students, that we're looking at $4,000 some dollars, we're looking at a possible maximum dollar amount of about $100 million in this bill.
It could be, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Oh, Mr. Gentleman is still recognized.
Yes, I'd like to speak to the bill briefly.
Gentleman is
or to
still
the amendment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just huge. I mean, here on the floor, we've been through 2 committees. Here on the floor, we are now adding we're going from $23 million to $100 million on this program. It's a huge part of the public budget. It's just huge. Your boards of education are not going to be able to absorb these kinds of cuts in 1 year. This bill has gone from very clearly stating that homeschool students and private school students were not eligible. That this was the concept of the bill is that it was a choice for the people in public schools to make to go try to find something different. And it was not for the folks who had already made that decision. By including those folks, it may feel somewhat equitable, but the price tag just went right through the roof. It is an unbelievable amount of money to be voting here in a simple amendment on the floor for the first time to completely change the nature of this program. I implore the members to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 56th, Douglas Howell, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Chair of Finance yield? The gentleman's amendment wouldn't take any effect for 5 years. So the 85th legislature, no budget that the 85th legislature passes, even the next one, would be affected.
The gentleman's correct.
The 86th legislature's budget would not be affected.
The gentleman's correct.
And
it's not until fiscal year 27.
So that would be the second session of the 87th legislature's budget.
Right.
So we would, by then, by the 87th legislature, we would see trends in how students are enrolling, how it's affecting the budgets and that. So if there was an adverse effect, the 87th legislature could take action and change the date if necessary to make sure that there's not a dramatic impact to these budgets.
The gentleman's correct. We do know from states that have a generous Hope Scholarship program like what we're offering today, we see no more than about 1% actually participate in the program. So yes, the gentleman is correct.
But we'll have some hard 5 years worth of data before we get to that budget.
Absolutely.
The 87th. So if any adjustments need to make,
the gentleman is
legislature could. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Burkhammer, wish to close debate on the amendment. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just want to keep a couple of things in mind here. Every child in this state will eventually be eligible that once this cycles through, and we're just shortening that up and we're putting a date on that. And I just want to also remind us that we should not be putting dollar figures on kids. These are West Virginia kids, West Virginia families, West Virginia parents, and we're just looking out for them, and I urge its adoption. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Burkhammer. Those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Hornbuckle, Evans, Thompson, and Walker move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle 2-17.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having read? There are no objections. Gentleman the 16th, Douglas Hornbuckle, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What my amendment and my colleague's amendment does here, it is seeking to concentrate our dollars at the people that will need it the most, enhancing their choice of the school. So I reserve the right to close. Ask for the yeas and nays.
The question before the House is the amendment is just explained by the gentleman the 16th, Douglas Hornbuckle. Are there members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman the 27th, Delegate Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The delegate's amendment just removes the possibility of how many children might be able to be eligible for this. The estimate, as the finance chair mentioned, was other states have about 1% of students, which would be about 2,500 students that have been seen in other states. We had the 2% in that line that said about 5,000 students, roughly. Now, this puts the 2,500 that the delegate's amendment would put in is a hard cap that could only be changed by future legislation in the future. It's something that would not give us some leeway that if that 1%, let's say 2,510 students currently want to do it, we wouldn't allow those other 10 students to be able to do it based on this bill. So I would reject that amendment based on that.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? If the gentleman the 18th, Worrell, is recognized.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Are we speaking on HFA Hornbuckle 2-17 or the HFA Hornbuckle, I think it's Thompson Walker 2-17?
Clerk will read the amendment. It's a short amendment. We'll read it for clarity.
Delegate Hornbuckle, Evans, Thompson, and Walker move to amend the bill move to amend Committee Substitute for House Bill 2013 on page 9, section 25, lines 5 and 6 by striking out the words "the greater of an amount not less than 2% of net public school enrollment adjusted for state aid purposes," and inserting in lieu thereof the words "no more than 2,500 of."
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment before the chair recognizes the sponsor to close debate? If not, gentleman the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it was wrong in my system, so I actually explained the bill that my colleague from the 18th was referencing. But the chairman of education did explain that bill. So what this amendment would do, again, is it would put a cap at 2,500. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have an infinite amount of money. We just don't. I wish we did, and no, you cannot put a dollar figure on a child, but we do not have an infinite amount of money. We also have some historical precedent here. 2018 or 19, I do forget the specific year, but in almost the exact same bill, we had caps on there. And again, to be fiscally prudent and conservative, I think it is good measures to be taken to put a cap on there. To ease, also, as we know, the work of the finance chair. That bill will cost about $23 million. Now, reducing that to $2,500, it comes out to about $11.6 million. We also have a lot of precedent in this body for dipping our toes in the water. This has the potential to be a good piece of legislation, but let's just make sure, again, that we are fiscally prudent when doing so. I also would liken this bill to the Promise Scholarship, which I know myself included, a lot of other people in here have been able to take advantage of. That has a block of money. That has a block of money that is set out for us as a legislature to be able to appropriate. And I think it will be consistent if we had a set number on this piece of legislation, which my amendment would do with the cap, to know what we're dealing with, again, when we're trying to be good stewards of taxpayer money. So for those reasons, I would urge strong adoption of the amendment. Thank you. Roll.
Chair did not hear the gentleman's last comment.
I said ask for the ayes and nays.
Oh, okay. The question before the House is the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 16th, on which the debate was just closed. A roll call vote has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 25 ayes, 69 nays, and 6 members absent and not voting. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Doyle, Thompson, Rowe, Walker, and Pushkin move to amend the bill. This is HFA Doyle et al. 2-16.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman, the 67th, Delegate Doyle, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is a critically needed amendment. If you look at the bill, it refers to to 42 USC 1981, which is a general prohibition against discrimination. In my mind, it's not even a prohibition, it's sort of an admonishment, thou shalt not discriminate. That's the way I read it. I think we need to have these 5 specific items included in this bill, so any Hope Scholarship program is prevented by the state of West Virginia from discriminating in these 5 categories. Without that, I think we're going to end up with A, a lot of discrimination, and therefore B, a lot of lawsuits. So for those reasons, I think we should adopt this amendment. I would reserve the right to close, Mr. Speaker, and I ask for the ayes and nays.
The question before the House is the amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the 67th. Are there members who wish to speak to adoption of the amendment? The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would rise to oppose the amendment, and I'll give you various reasons based on what's already in code. Parents are choosing to send their child to this particular program. Unlike the public school system, it's not a school that is being chosen for them. They voluntarily choose to go into the Hope Scholarship program. So if they go to another school, they're voluntarily choosing to do that. Now, based on discrimination, this has different points. Number one, race is not necessary because it's already protected. Title VI prohibits schools from discriminating based on race, color, or national origin in admissions and hiring. A private school that violates Title VI would also lose its nonprofit status from the IRS. Almost all private schools are nonprofits because the nonprofit status allows them to receive these tax-deductible contributions. 2, sex. Title IX applies to private schools that accept federal funds. So private single-sex schools should not be required to develop 2 separate programs within the school to be a participating Hope Scholarship school. Since parents would have to choose to withdraw a student from public school and enroll the child in a single-sex school, the concern about voluntariness of a single-sex classroom placement is simply not present in the context of the Hope Scholarship program. 3, religion. Religiously affiliated schools can consider religion in their admission process, but a parent's selection of a private school is completely voluntary. And I'll give an example that the Supreme Court gave, and I'm not planning to be a lawyer, I'll let the Judiciary Committee back me up on this, but what I have here is said that the U.S. Supreme Court recently held that excluding religiously affiliated private schools from a Montana scholarship program for students attending private schools unconstitutionally discriminated based on religion. The court also held that the Montana Scholarship Program for students attending private schools was permissible under the Establishment Clause, particularly given that the state government support made its way to religious schools only as a result of Montanans independently choosing to spend their scholarships at such schools. That would be similar here with the Hope Scholarship. Disability. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, the state is required to allocate a portion of federal IDEA funds to identify, locate, and evaluate private school children who may be eligible for special education services. The local school district has a duty known as Child Find to identify private school students in the district in need of services and then consult with the private school to plan for delivery of those certain special education services such as speech therapy or auxiliary aids to those students through a service plan. So that covers that. The Title III also applies to private entities offering public accommodations, and those schools must offer reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities. So last would be gender identification. This is not currently constitutionally protected by federal or state law for public or private schools. There is no federal law applying to public or private school students that makes sexual orientation a protected class for the purposes of discrimination. This would create additional rights for Hope Scholarship recipients that wouldn't be available to other public or private school students. So the appropriate mechanism, in my opinion, would be to place this type of amendment in the West Virginia Human Rights Act and not in this bill. And for those reasons, I reject the amendment.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Doug Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman of education just yield for one really quick question?
Yes, sir.
Chairman does yield.
Thank you, Chairman. So you went through, and I appreciate you going through the list of the different protections offered, based on a physical handicap and special needs. I really appreciate that. And you did mention gender identity. That is currently not protected at the state or federal level, but you didn't mention anything about sexual orientation. Is sexual orientation currently protected at the federal level for students?
I believe it is not protected, but I believe there was a Supreme Court opinion regarding it. So regarding employment, not students.
That was a recent one, yeah, to protect against employment. But my question then too, would this language in this amendment just not strengthen the bill to ensure that all students are not discriminated against in if they want to do this school choice, if they want to go to this?
The bill already says that no student should be discriminated against. What we want to put into our state code, I think, is appropriate in another venue, not in this bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Speak to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to strongly urge adoption of this amendment. I think this is a great amendment. It's going to strengthen the bill. It's going to ensure that students can have access to this school choice, and they're not going to be discriminated against based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. And I think it's a great way to send a message to the state and to the nation that West Virginia is going to protect all students. So I urge adoption of the amendment. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? If not, the chair recognizes the gentleman from the 67th, Doug Doyle, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The list of things that the chair of education read is certainly accurate, but it seems like to me it's a very convoluted way of accomplishing what this amendment accomplishes very simply. So I urge the adoption of the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Yes, the gentleman did. The gentleman from the 67th did demand a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is on adoption of the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed to adoption will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 21 ayes, 72 nays, and 7 members absent and not voting. Less than a majority having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Rowe moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Row 2-17.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman at 36, Delegate Rowe, is recognized to explain the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, because of the passage of the amendment opening the qualifications up to homeschool and others, my amendment, I think, is moved, so I would move to withdraw.
Are there objections to having the amendment withdrawn? There are no objections. The amendment is withdrawn. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Hornbuckle, Evans, Thompson, and Walker move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle, Evans, Thompson, and Walker 2-17, number 2.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? The gentleman from 27th?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that on my system, so I have no idea what amendment that is.
Chair will ask the clerk to confirm the availability of the amendment. Chair is advised by the clerk that members will need to refresh your systems for the amendment to load, but we will also have the clerk read the amendment.
Delegate Hornbuckle, Evans, Thompson, and Walker move to amend the committee substitute for House Bill 2013 on page 10, section 2, line 14 by striking out the word and on line 17 of section 2 following the semicolon by inserting the following: and C, the household income for the household of the recipient does not exceed $50,000 per person filing a single return or $100,000 per person filing a joint return.
You've just heard the amendment. The question is on adoption of the amendment as just read by the clerk. Are there members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman, the 64th, Delegate Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I don't believe that we should be punishing children for the simple reasons of what their parents make. So for those reasons, I urge rejection.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment? The gentleman, the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect, and I don't take offense, but I don't think we're punishing anyone here by doing this. Again, trying to be a good steward of the money in the spirit of being fiscally conservative. Currently, right now, our household median in West Virginia is about $46,700 for a family. For a single person, it is slightly above $26,000. So what this amendment is aiming to do is make sure that we appropriate the bulk of the monies to those families. Because if we do not, to use the gentleman's word, punishing, we will punish other children in the public education system. So let's make sure that we are narrowing what we're trying to do here on these families. Also, the word choice. I've heard the word choice for a very, very long time. And that word is an act of selecting or making a decision when one is faced with two or more possibilities. So for a lot of these people that he's speaking about, they already have that possibility. They already have the possibility to enjoy a private school education if they so wish. What we're wanting to do right here is to make sure that we are providing a choice in an adequate and robust manner for the people who do not have that ability to do that. And Mr. Speaker, I'm trying here, again, to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars and to be fiscally conservative. But I'm going to be frank, I'm getting confused because there's a lot of people that are spending very liberally in here. So again, in the spirit of being fiscally conservative, dipping our toes in the water, not to do away with it, just to be conservative, I would urge adoption. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 27th, Doug Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I understand his rationale for that. However, you go back to the Constitution of West Virginia, and it says that we're supposed to provide a free and efficient education for all students, not just those that families make over $50,000 or $100,000 on their income tax. So if we're trying to do this for the kids, each kid should be entitled to the same thing. This is just taking the state portion that is allotted to the public school system for those individuals. So each student should be able to get this, be entitled to the same amount. So I would urge rejection of the amendment based on that.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Doug Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the amendment and also ask for yeas and nays as well.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is hey guys, let's jump on board. Let's be fiscally conservative. We don't want to be those tax and spends. Let's, keep this budget in line. And this is really going to make sure that this bill will help out those who need it the most. This will help out and ensure that students who are lower income will benefit from this bill. And I think that this is a wonderful way of practicing our fiscal conservatives. So please adopt this amendment.
The gentleman from the 18th, Doug Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman from the 43rd yield?
Yes.
Gentleman does yield.
All right, thank you, sir. How many children do you have?
How many children do I have?
Yes, sir.
I have 0.
All right, I only
have 2
ask.
dogs.
I only ask because I have 6 children, and I can assure you that for every child I have, that it reduces my household income. I love them dearly, so I don't hold that against them, but I can assure you that. So we are saying here that basically a single mother making $51,000 a year with 4 children would not be eligible for this. Is that correct?
With this amendment, 50 single following, no.
Okay, so in a sense, you could say we are punishing the children, as the chairman of finance said, because a single mother who's working her hardest to make $51,000 a year and has 4 children could not be part of this if this amendment were to be adopted.
She must not be a public school teacher because she's making more than I am.
Understood. All right, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Speak to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to urge rejection of this amendment due to the simple fact I just explained with the gentleman from the 43rd that families who have multiple children, myself included, would be affected by this. Like I said, as a single mother, it takes household income, not taxable income. So I would urge rejection of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from the 4th, Doug Zukoff, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do agree with what my colleague just said. I think maybe we should have a sliding scale for the number of children that you have, because as he mentioned, you do have more children you have, the more expenses you have. But the argument that was just given here, that we are going to penalize children and that they're not, because of the income level, and they're not going to have the opportunities. We did this yesterday with the charter school bill. We know that every West Virginia child is not going to have the opportunity to go to a charter school, but we voted for it anyway. So I find that argument ironic, and I would suggest that we probably need some work on this bill to create a sliding scale for the number of children in terms of income. I think this is giving, this bill is giving an advantage to West Virginians that make more money. And in all fairness, I'm one of the people who has sent my child to private school. So I know that that was an opportunity and a right that I had because I could afford it. I think we made this choice yesterday on charter schools. It didn't matter whether everybody had the opportunity or not. And today we're voting quite differently. So for those reasons, I would urge support of the amendment.
The gentleman from the 16th, Doug Hornbuckle, to close debate on the amendment. No. Roll call vote on the amendment has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 22 ayes, 73 nays, and 5 members absent not voting. Less than a majority having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Ellington moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Ellington 2-17, number 1.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. Gentleman from the 27th to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment just makes technical changes. When the bill went through finance, the particular references in code were not moved over, so this just corrects those two things. It doesn't change the way the bill is. So
Are there members who wish
adoption.
to speak to the amendment? If not, the question before the House is the amendment is just explained by the gentleman from the 27th. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares that amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2009 relating to limitations on the use of wages and agency shop fees by employers and labor organizations for political activities.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2325 removing the requirement of continuing education for barbers and cosmetologists.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2366 requiring agencies who have approved a proposed rule that affects fees or other special revenues to provide to the committee a fiscal note.
The bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleague, Delegate Linville.
Are there objections to a leave being granted? Chair hears no objections. Leave of absence shall be granted. Introduction of guests. Miscellaneous business. The gentleman to 30th, Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I inquire of the chair and the clerk, if I may.
Yes.
I'm requesting the availability of the chamber for the purposes of remarks by members on February 24th at 4:30 p.m.
Yes, Chair is in receipt of that request. It has been communicated to the clerk. Clerk will schedule that time with the member as close to that requested time as possible on that day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Other miscellaneous business? If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Thursday, February 18th.
Are there announcements? Gentleman the 10th, Delegate Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow morning in the House chambers, February 18th at 9 a.m. for a budget hearing from the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman the 32nd, Delegate Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. in Government Organization Room. The agenda will be posted. Also, the Republican members of Judiciary will caucus up in GovOrg meeting room at 8:30 a.m. in the morning.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 in House Judiciary. And secondly, if you received your bio from the clerk, please approve that and turn that in to him.
Gentleman the 27th, Delegate Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow, Thursday, February 18th at 1 p.m. in the House chamber. The agenda will be posted. And just a reminder, Republican members of the committee will have a caucus at 5 o'clock today. We have a joint caucus with our Senate colleagues.
Gentleman the 15th, Delegate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will not meet tomorrow. Will not meet tomorrow.
To Gentleman the 28th, Delegate Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Homeland Security and Veterans Affairs will meet as close to 3 o'clock as we can get there today. The agenda has been posted. Thank you.
Gentleman the 22nd, Delegate Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet today at 3 o'clock in the House chamber. That's 3 o'clock in the House chamber. Thank you.
Gentleman the 63rd, Delegate Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet today at 2 o'clock in the House chambers. We'll be setting our rules and taking up legislation. I'd also like to make an announcement to thank all of the coal miners in West Virginia and thank all of the people that work at our coal-fired power plants for all the heat and electricity they're generating for all of our people. I walked home last night. It was 13 degrees when I left the Capitol. It was very cold, but when I got to my apartment, the lights were on and it was warm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman the 66, Douglas Espinosa. House will be in order. Gentleman 66 has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I announced yesterday, Father Tiho is here at the Capitol today, and he has remained here because we've run a little bit long. So again, that's in Senate Education. I think that's 427W. For those of you not familiar with where the Senate Education Room is, if you go up to the second floor on the Judiciary side of the building, follow the hall down, and then you'll find Senate Education on the left. He'll be there probably for about 15 or 20 minutes, so please make your way there so that he can get on his way, and that'll be for dispensation of ashes. Thank you.
Lady in 52nd, Douglas Seipold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Seniors, Children, and Family Issues was to meet at 1 o'clock today in GovOrg. I'm assuming we will meet immediately after adjournment.
Gentleman the 44th, Douglas Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse will meet today immediately following the Committee on Senior Children and Families in the Government Organization Room. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman the first, Douglas Atezolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Workforce Development will meet 10 minutes after the session today in the chamber. Thank you.
Gentleman the 30th, Douglas Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce to the body the inaugural season of WNL, which is Wednesday Night Live, which is members' remarks from the Capitol next Wednesday at 4:30, and our host for the evening will be the gentleman from Clay, I hope, or if not, the masked bandit from Mineral County. I'm trying to put together a lineup. I'm looking for musical guests. Folks, you've got 5 minutes to talk, so if you want to get in the inaugural season, it's going to be streaming live to all of West Virginia, and I hope we can put on a performance that we'll all be proud of. But in all seriousness, you know, it feels like day 48, not day 8. There's a lot of new people here. Give us a chance to kind of get to know each other. So please, if you can't be here, fine. If you can, then you've got 5 minutes to sort of introduce yourself and talk about something that's important to you. So that's my hope, and hopefully we can do it every Wednesday, which is a light day for us here with minor committees, subject matter committees meeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other announcements? If not, the question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor will say aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
when we're done up here, you want me to take the boom mic stuff down? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can go back downstairs.
Was going to go back downstairs.
What's that?
Was going back downstairs?